What I want to talk about next are the goals of the class. I have 4 goals for this class. Number 1, I would like you to consider yourself a character educator, not just an educator. You know, there's a tremendous difference between someone who feels themselves, my job is to educate young people, and someone that comes in and says, my job is to educate the whole person. I'm a character educator. Quite obviously, Coach Jim Place believes that you should be a character educator. You know, the biggest mistake that people make is to separate the two. Here's education, and here's character education. That's not true. They go together. One of my favorite sayings is this: character education is not on the plate, it is the plate. You have to believe that the more time you spend in character education, it's going to benefit the students. Academic performance is going to go up because students are motivated. Think about it. Your biggest problem in having success as a group are the unmotivated students. How do you motivate all your students? Character education has to be woven into every part of the education program. One thing I've found is that some schools have started specific classes on character education. That's great. I mean, that is a tremendous commitment and it's a good thing. But I think more important is to incorporate it into every part of the curriculum. Everything that teachers do, somewhere in there, should have an eye on character education, whether directly, where you say, okay, here are activities that we're going to do today, and here's how they relate to the development of character, or indirectly. The next thing, I have another saying that I believe in. It's called 40, 40, 40. And I want to ask you this question. Are you educating your students so that the material that they have, that you presented, has an effect upon them for 40 minutes? So that at the end of the class they remember it and they forget it. How about for 40 hours? So maybe at the end of the week they can take a test and they can do well on the test and then that's it. Or how about the true challenge of an educator? Are you educating young people for 40 years? Are you giving them the skills that they need to be successful in whatever it is that they're going to do for the rest of their lives? That's the true challenge of an educator. That's why I challenge you to be a character educator and not an educator. To take everything that you're doing in your academic area and try to incorporate some way that that's going to be developing character. All right, the second goal that I want to talk about is I want to give you time to reflect on character education. You know, in a daily routine, you get into a routine where you come in, you arrive at school, you teach your classes, you go home. You just don't have time to reflect on character education. I think that there are times that you have to take a step back and think about, you know, what am I really here for? What's the true purpose of character education? You know, the third goal that I want to talk about is I want to give you a system that works. I want to give you an example. Now, I am going to spend a lot of time in class talking about the character card. You have an example of it in your worksheet. Here's what it looks like, okay? 2 sides to it. A little later in the class, I'm going to go through this in great detail. But the reason I tell you that is now is that's my system. That is my plan. I don't think that attitude just happens. I have a very detailed plan to say this is how I'm going to develop a good attitude in students. I'm going to give you this plan as an example. I'm not saying develop a character card. I'm not saying this is how you have to do it. That works for me and has worked for me for close to 40 years that I've used that particular system in one form or another. What works for you? What's the system that you can develop that will develop a better attitude in your students? When you finish this class, I sincerely hope that you meet goal number 3, that you sit down, reflect on what system can I do, whether it's a very subtle and small change in the way you do things, or whether it's a big change and say, you know what, I'm going to do things totally different. But whatever it is, I challenge you to develop a plan to have a system of your own. All right, the fourth point is implementing. So now it's time for you to go and implement, and I challenge you to implement. There's a couple of rules, though, that I want to throw out to you in there. I'm a great believer in these 2 rules when it's time to implement. The first rule is this: the only mistake you can make is to do nothing. So many people think that in order to be a character educator, you have to have some grand plan and you have to belong to a committee and all of these kind of things have to happen. No. The very most important thing that you have to realize is the only mistake that you can make is to do nothing. You know, so many of us are afraid of making mistakes that we say, well, I can't do that. What happens if I make a mistake? You know what? There is no textbook in character education. We're dealing with human beings. It's not like a factual information. Whether you present the material, they learn it, and then they respond to it on a test. There is no textbook for developing character education. The way you do it is the right way because you're unique. Every educator has their own way of presenting things, their own way that will work. Again, the only mistake you can make is do nothing. The second is this: win little battles. You know, my last position was I was the head football coach at Ponance High School, which is a Dayton public school, and I really enjoyed my 3 years there. And I went in just about all day, every day. I didn't just coach football there. I tried to have an impact on the school district. But there's one thing that I realized. I could not change the city of Dayton. That's not going to happen. If I could have a very minimal, extremely minimal effect on Dayton Public Schools, I would have been thrilled. I really believe I could have some effect on Ponance High School. As a matter of fact, I got to spend 15 wonderful years at Chaminade Julienne High School, and I really took one of my goals to use the football program to impact the entire student body. And over a 15-year period, to a certain extent, I think that happened. So let's go back to Ponance, though. So hopefully I can have an effect on the entire student body, and that's why I win it all day, every day. But the next thing is this. I thought that I could have a major effect on the 80 young men that are in the football program. Now, how could I have a major effect upon them? I could have a major effect on them by winning little battles. There were some of those 80s that I would remain in their lives the rest of their lives. There were 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever number, who totally embraced everything. That what we did in the football program was going to be the basis of their entire lives. So granted, did I affect the whole school? No, but I affected that very small group of students that we're going to have a huge effect upon. The next thing upon the 80 is, I hope that something that I did every single day affected all of them in one way or another. Maybe they don't totally buy into it. Maybe it's not their total personality, but something that I did affected them. I think as a classroom teacher, you have to have that same attitude of win little battles. You know what? You're not going to affect the entire school, but you can certainly have a couple of students in your class that you have just this major, major effect that you know I affected those students. For all your students, you have to have the attitude, I'm going to do something, no matter how small, in my class today that affects all of them in a positive manner. So there you go. The only mistake that you can make is to do nothing and win little battles. I think if you focus on those, you have a much greater chance of success than if you try to win the great big battles and you constantly are frustrated. Okay, whole new train of thought. I'm going to give what I call disclaimers. Just things that before we get back into the material that I want to present, that I want to clear up. And the first disclaimer that I want to give you is this. If you're going to do a character education program, no matter how small, just a little program in your classroom, or you're going to be involved in your building, or maybe even district-wide, the first thing that I'd give anyone the advice on is this. Make sure you totally commit to it. I have 2 tests to determine whether you really and truly have made the right commitment. The first test is this. Will still be around in 2 years. Now, I think there's a time for programs that maybe you do one time and they're done, you never do them again, but make it very clear that that's just a one-time thing that you're going to do and it'll be done with it. You know, so many times administrators go to a workshop and get all fired up and come back and they say to the staff, okay, we're going to do this. And we are all going to buy into it. And we're going to spend time in faculty meetings and in services. And I want you to do research and all this kind of thing because I want you to buy into this. And they present that in a meeting in August and everybody gets all fired up. And then you know what? In February, you look at your teaching friends and you go, does anybody remember that program? There's no commitment to it. It's no wonder teachers don't buy into things, don't give acceptance to things. They say, oh, here we go again. As simple as that. I think when you sit down at any level of character education, you got to ask yourself this: will we really be doing this in 2 years? Do we have the resources? Do we have the passion? Do we have the commitment to say, this is something that I am going to buy into, and I'm going to make sure that I do this year in and year out? Now, that's the plan. It doesn't always work out that way. It could happen that something that develops, that the program just doesn't work, and you're better off cutting ties and running. But I think going in, you have to make that commitment to say, we're going to do this every year. And as I go through it and talk about the things, I'll talk about that. The character card as such on the actual card, I've done for 20 years. The 10 principles on the card, I've done for 40 years. I've committed that, and that's the way that I do things. The second test is this: can the students tell you about it? So many things look good on paper. Oh, that's a great program. And that's a national program, and it sure sounds good to me. Then you put it in, but it has no effect on the students. That's the ultimate test, is does it have an effect upon the student? Let me give you a couple examples of that. Classroom posters. I think, especially dealing with character education, I think that they are just absolutely great. But I got an asterisk after that. They're great if you relate to them, if you talk about them all the time. If there's something that happens in class and you say, now stop, look, let's talk about what's on our poster. If you just put them up at the beginning of the year, you never talk about them, you never have a focus on them, don't put them up. Just as simple as that. That's what Coach Jim Place believes. You know what? If you could get your students outside the classroom and not let them in one day and go, what are the posters on the wall? And not one student could tell you what's on the wall, or maybe one could tell you something on the wall. Well, then why are you putting them up? You have to make sure that your students connect to what you're doing. You know, I had a student who took my class, and she did something I thought was really neat. She was a movie buff. And so she put all kind of posters all around the wall, like Rocky Balboa and this poster and that poster. And then she constantly would stop and talk about that during the class period. That's good use of posters. The students can tell you about it. I'm convinced that if you ask the students in that teacher's class what's on the walls, they could tell you. You know, something else that brought me great pride is that I was the head football coach at Chaminade Julienne, and we ran a youth camp. And the youth camp was our students grades 4 through 8, and they came in. We had about 150 of them. And the workers at the youth camp were my college football players. They had played for me out playing college football. And what we did every day is we would go 45 minutes of instruction, a 5-minute water break, and then 10 minutes of what we call get it together period. And the get it together period was my college players standing up talking to these young students. Without exception, the college players would say, listen, you're going to get a character card. And here's something on the character card, and here's something that I believe that I bought into on the character card that has led to my success. Now you know your players are listening to you. Now you know it's in the everyday lives of their players. Here's another example. At Withrow and opponents, I wish I would have done this sooner. We had posters all over our weight room, and right on the doors you walked in, and it was no bullying. It said, we will not tolerate bullying anywhere in this program. And I really believe that bullying is going to be one of the biggest changes in our educational system. Hopefully, my grandchildren will not have to experience the bullying problems that different generations have experienced. But back to the posters. I told all my coaches and I told all my players, listen, this just isn't something on the wall. This is something we're going to live. If there's ever an example of bullying anywhere in the program, not just a weight room, I want to know about it right away. So a few times, and not a few times, probably more than a few times, something happened. Well, if you do this, well, yeah, I saw it, or say, stop that, well, then don't put the posters on the wall. But we would stop things and say, stop, this is a time for us to talk about bullying. Let's all talk about it, let's all reflect upon it, but you can't just say, well, that's something. You've got to make a commitment to everything that you do. Second disclaimer, I think you have to have a tremendous passion for what you believe in. You have to have a tremendous passion for character education. You know, you don't have to believe that your way is the only way of doing it, but you have to believe that you do it a great way, that you have a tremendous passion for it. I make no excuses for my passion, just as simple as that. Part of that passion is you have to talk about it every day. It has to be something that's incorporated in everything that you do. Your students have to feel your passion. Now, something that we did is at the end of every practice, we had a character time. How about your class? Could you have 3 minutes at the beginning or end of every class and character time? Remember, it goes back to that theory. Character education isn't on the plate, it is the plate. It's time well spent. But we do it every single day. Matter of fact, there were practices where I got really busy, and the end of practice, okay, that's it. I'd have a young man put his hand up and say, Coach, you forgot character time. And I say, you're right. Now you know that system's working when they respond to you in that way. You know, one of the best things in character time was one of my assistant coaches before practice. Coach, I'd like to say something today. Now it's affecting the whole program. And even better, I've had times where some of the players say, Coach, I want to say something during character time today. I say, okay, good. Remind me to call on you. And I'm going to have you stand up and say to the team what you'd like to talk about as far as character time. A lot of times, to be honest with you, I got in situations with a young man where I say, listen, during character time today, you got to make a little apology to your teammates. But we had it every day, year round. Off-season workouts, in-season. It's a commitment that you've got to make. It shows your passion. What do I talk about? Well, usually there's something that happens that day that I talk about. There's something going on in the upcoming game. There's something going on in the program. That's easy. But sometimes there isn't. So I keep a folder. I got this great big folder full of articles, dealing with different character situations. So if there's a time where I'm saying, I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about today, I go into that articles. What are some of the articles? There's an article about a young man who was an outstanding athlete, and he got caught breaking and entering, and he got thrown out of school. My message there is, guys, do you really, truly, when you think about how much work you put in, do you want to lose it all by committing a crime of that nature? Another one, leading scorer suspended. They're in the paper every day. You can find something, especially how it relates to character education. Here's one, professional athletes. It's nice to think that if education, and athletics particularly, build character, the higher up the ladder, the higher your character. We all know that's not true. It should be true, but it's not true. Here's another thing. Almost every young man at some point in his career dreams of playing professional sports. So I talked to him. I said, listen, if you want to play professional sports and all of a sudden you get to that point and you get cut like this young man did because of character issues, what good did that do you? As simple as that, there's something every day. This is one of my favorite ones. This one dealt with, and you can't see that, but I'll tell you about it, a young man at a high school in New Jersey. He was a high school All-American. He had committed to go to the University of Michigan. He tweeted or posted on social media an anti-Semitic post about a Jewish young lady. The University of Michigan checked their social media accounts, their Facebook accounts. They saw it. They pulled a scholarship. He could not get a scholarship anywhere. The entire country cut this prime what's called a level 5 recruit loose because of that. Well, I think that if you're an educator, you should tell a story like that. I think you have a responsibility to digital citizenship. If you're going to ask your students to get involved in digital education, you've got to have a responsibility to talk to them about digital citizenship. I will use that story right there as an example to my players, talking about the use of social media. How many times things happen on social media that can really disrupt a team simply because something that was posted on social media about a team member or the other team or something that happened in school or something in their personal lives. I think you have a responsibility, if you're going to make assignments that deal with something digital, that you've got a responsibility to explain digital citizenship, and there's no better way of doing it than to give examples. Now, there's examples of good character, there's bad character, there's examples of good character. Here's Javon Ringer. I can't think of a better example of good character. Javon Ringer, I was so blessed and so fortunate to coach him at Chaminade Julienne High School, and he was a great football player. Went on to become a first-team All-American at Michigan State, went on to play professional football. He was a finalist for the Heisman Trophy, the best player in the country. But what people don't know is as a person, he was even better than he was as a player. His commitment to character was off the charts. Now, he's very fortunate that that was the culture of his home that he was brought up in. So I wish I could take credit for it, but the credit goes to his mom and dad, who were both ministers. And of course, Javon majored in pastoral studies. But Javon is an example of that. And there was an article about him, lots of articles about Javon, but this one I took great pride in because he talked about the high school character card. He talked about the role that the high school character card had in his development and how he incorporated and he had it for success. You know, when you're talking to a young man and you mention, especially Chaminade Julienne or the city of Dayton, Javon Ringer, their eyes get big. That's a role model. And all of a sudden he's saying that he used the character card for his path to success. It can't get any better than that. So my point is this, finding things to talk about, when you make that commitment, when you bring the passion, they're easy. You find them every day, and really it was a part of the program that I was most proud of. Now, going along the lines with passion and commitment is this, you've got to get the players to believe in your passion. You know what, if it's your program, so if this character card is my character card and not the player's character card, it can only have so much effect, really a very limited effect. The whole key to the success of any character program is that when it becomes their character card and what they believe in, then you've really got it made.